Have you ever noticed how the loudest person in the room is rarely the one in control? In a world where people argue just to be heard, the cost of every word is often your own peace. You explain, defend, react, and in doing so you give others the keys to your emotions. But what if the real strength isn't found in raising your voice, but in choosing not to respond at all? Here's the brutal truth. Arguing doesn't prove power. It reveals a need to be validated, understood, and agreed with. But Stoic philosophy teaches us something radically different. That true control isn't about winning the argument. It's about never needing to step into the fight. The Stoics believed that mastering yourself is the highest form of power. And silence? It's not absence. It's presence. So commanding that it unsettles ego, disarms pride, and commands respect without a single word. If you've ever walked away from an argument feeling drained, misunderstood, or like you lost a piece of yourself, you're not alone. Many of us were taught that being right matters more than being wise. But this video will show you another path. A path where stillness becomes your strategy, and silence becomes your sword. Stay with me. What you're about to discover might just free you from battles that were never worth fighting. If you're ready to master this inner strength, like this video, subscribe, and let's go deeper. 1. Power is perception, not performance. The world doesn't reward truth. It rewards perception. You can be the most intelligent, the most logical, even the most correct. But if your presence doesn't command respect, none of it matters. Power in its purest form is not found in performance. It's felt through perception. And yet, most people chase the opposite. They speak more to prove they're right, argue more to gain approval, and react more to feel seen. But every word uttered from a place of insecurity chips away at the very influence they seek to build. Arguing is not power, it's exposure. It reveals your hunger to be acknowledged, your need to be right, your fear of being misunderstood. And when your words carry that desperation, you're no longer the one in control. You're the one being controlled. Because now your energy is no longer yours. It's dependent on how others respond to you. In a world screaming for attention, the one who remains composed becomes magnetic. He doesn't speak to be heard. He speaks only when silence has done its job. He's not interested in performing authority, he embodies it. While others scatter their presence with noise, he consolidates his through stillness. This isn't about becoming passive. It's about understanding that true leverage doesn't come from being the loudest. It comes from being the least reactive. The moment you enter a debate, you step into their frame, and that frame is rarely built to serve you. It's bait, emotional bait, designed to pull you into a battlefield where ego is king and logic is irrelevant. Once you're in, your strength is no longer yours. It's judged, dissected, compared, and inevitably misunderstood. But the one who remains silent holds a different kind of power. He's not dragged into emotional quicksand. He doesn't need to prove anything. And because of that, he becomes unrateable, unshakable, untouchable. Imagine a boardroom, a heated meeting, accusations flying. One person is yelling, defending, and arguing every point like a warrior with too many weapons. Another remains calm, attentive, and composed. He listens, he waits, he speaks once and only once, but when he does, the entire room shifts. Why? Because silence built anticipation, because his words weren't diluted by desperation, because he wasn't there to prove, he was there to direct. That is influence. And it begins not with what you say, but what you choose not to say. You see, when you stop performing, you stop leaking power. You create mystique, one of the most formidable forces in any social dynamic. People don't attack what they don't understand. They don't challenge what they can't predict. The more you explain, the more they dissect. The more you react, the more they control the tempo. But when you stay calm, when your stillness becomes your signal, the game flips. You're no longer in their hands. They're in yours. This is where Stoic discipline converges with psychological mastery. To the Stoics, emotional control wasn't a tactic, it was identity. To stay composed wasn't an act, it was the way of being. And when that calm becomes consistent, it becomes your power. Not power to dominate, but to transcend. To operate above the noise while others drown in it. Most people argue because they believe words win respect. But the truth is, respect is rarely given to those who fight to earn it. It's given to those who don't need it to act. When you are centered, grounded, and sure of your own values, your energy doesn't chase approval. It invites adjustment. Others recalibrate themselves in your presence, not because you've convinced them, but because your stillness exposes their chaos. This is the paradox of real power. You earn more by needing less, you lead more by controlling less, and you influence more by saying less. That's why the person who doesn't perform, but simply is, commands the room without ever having to ask for it. So the next time you feel the urge to speak just to prove a point, pause. Breathe. Ask yourself, am I expressing power or leaking it? And then let silence speak for you. Because silence carries a weight no argument ever could. 2. Arguing fuels ego. Silence dismantles it. Every argument is an invitation to battle, but not of logic, of ego. And the moment you accept, you've already lost something vital, your positioning. People rarely argue to seek the truth. They argue to defend their pride. What appears to be a discussion of ideas is beneath the surface a defense of identity. That's why facts fail and reason falls short. You are not debating points. You are confronting the emotional armor someone built to protect their self-image. The louder you speak, the more they fortify that wall. And the more invested you become, the more leverage you surrender. Arguing seems noble. It feels like strength. But in the realm of power, it's a miscalculation, because it signals that you can be provoked. It says, I need to be right. I need to be understood. And that need is the very crack your opponent was waiting for. What you think is conviction, they interpret as exposure. Your voice rises, your breath shortens, and now they know your pressure points. Silence, by contrast, offers no grip, no edge to hold on to, no emotion to read. It becomes a void where their ego cannot escalate. And in that void, they are left wrestling with themselves. This is the paradox. You disarm by not responding. You dissolve tension not by calming it, but by offering it nothing to fight. An unprovoked presence becomes a mirror. It reflects the other person's instability with brutal clarity. And while they fumble to regain composure, you remain intact, unaffected, observing, commanding not by sound, but by stillness. Imagine someone insults you publicly. Their words are sharp. Their tone is arrogant. The room shifts. All eyes turn. They expect retaliation, but you give them nothing. No flinch, no counterattack. Just calm observation. Their ego now has nowhere to land. The stage they built collapses under silence, and the power they tried to seize returns to you multiplied, because you didn't defend your worth. You made it untouchable. This isn't passivity. This is control. This is choosing when and where to place your energy. You don't enter every ring because someone demands it. You don't draw your sword just because someone throws words. You measure the moment. You calculate the cost. And sometimes the most decisive move is no move at all. In the Stoic tradition, restraint isn't weakness, it's identity. They train not to suppress emotion but to master its direction. To pause before reaction, to observe before judgment. Because they understood that the strongest force isn't the one that strikes first, it's the one that remains unmoved under fire. The modern world rewards speed and reaction. Social media fuels outrage, instant replies, public arguments. But this very speed is what exposes people. They show what offends them, what provokes them, what unsettles their calm. And when your buttons are visible, anyone can press them. But when you choose silence strategically, when you resist the bait, you signal something dangerous to others. You can't be manipulated. You won't fight battles beneath you. You won't reveal your position until it suits your advantage. That's power. The kind that doesn't ask, it asserts. The kind that doesn't beg to be understood. It lets misunderstanding collapse under its own weight. Too many people argue out of habit, out of ego, out of fear that silence makes them look weak. But silence, when grounded in inner certainty, doesn't make you invisible. It makes you untouchable. In that quiet, you don't surrender, you ascend. And those who watch, consciously or not, begin to adjust their energy to match yours. So next time someone challenges you, pause. Don't give them what they expect. Don't trade logic for chaos. Let your stillness unsettle their certainty. Let your silence force their ego to stand alone. Because silence, when chosen with intention, dismantles far more than words ever could. 3. Make silence your strongest defense. Every time you speak in defense of yourself, you reveal what matters to you. Every argument, every clarification, every explanation is a spotlight you shine on your own emotional terrain. And when others can see your emotional terrain, they can invade it. That's why the one who masters silence is more than disciplined. He is impenetrable. In a world trained to react, silence is not emptiness. It's fortification. The instinct to defend is deeply human. We want to correct misunderstandings, to protect our reputation, to ensure others see our intent. But this instinct, when acted upon blindly, becomes our greatest liability, because defending yourself reveals what you fear losing. It shows what gets under your skin. It turns your boundaries into coordinates, your patience into a countdown. The more you speak, the more you map out your vulnerabilities. Now imagine the opposite. Imagine someone insults your competence in front of a group. The room stiffens, waiting for a response. You say nothing. No frown, no retort, just calm. In that instant, you become unreadable. The energy that was launched at you falls flat, because your silence builds a wall. Not a wall of avoidance, but of sovereignty. Your peace becomes untouchable, not because you retreat, but because you refuse to be baited. This is where silence transforms into strategy. It's not a lack of words. It's the intelligent withholding of them. Silence doesn't mean surrender. It means selection. The wise don't speak less because they lack words, but because they've measured the cost of using them. And in situations where tension rises, silence becomes the highest leverage. It gives you time. It gives you vision. It gives you control. In negotiation, the person who fills the silence too quickly often gives away the most. In conflict, the one who reacts first is usually reacting from emotion, not principle. But the one who listens fully, pauses strategically, and speaks rarely is the one shaping the tempo. They aren't running from conflict. They're letting the conflict exhaust itself. Because when noise meets silence, silence always lasts longer. This kind of restraint requires more than patience. It requires power, inner power. The kind that comes from not needing to be understood in every moment. The kind that doesn't crumble under misinterpretation. Because true presence doesn't depend on clarity. It depends on certainty. And when you're certain in yourself, your silence stops being passive. It becomes provocative. People lean in. They guess. They wonder. That mystique is your advantage. Too often, people treat every disagreement like an emergency, like it must be addressed. But not every attack deserves a response. Not every provocation warrants a reaction. When you treat every slight as a battle, you end up fighting wars that don't matter. Wars that bleed your energy, cloud your judgment, and distract you from the bigger game. The Stoics understood this well. They didn't aim to win arguments. They aimed to win control over themselves. That was the real war. To govern one's own reactions, to remain unmoved in storms that shook others. Their silence wasn't void. It was power concentrated inward. It was a fortress not made of stone, but of discipline. And here's the mistake many make. They confuse reaction with relevance. They believe if they don't respond, they'll lose standing. If they stay silent, they'll be seen as weak. But the opposite is true. In restraint, there is power. In non-response, there is dominance. Because the man who does not react cannot be controlled. So the next time someone tries to provoke you, at work, online, at home, pause. Feel the rise of emotion, but do not act on it. Instead, allow silence to settle. Let your eyes, your posture, your calmness do the speaking. And if you must respond, do so from command, not emotion. From clarity, not impulse. Use words like a scalpel, not a sword. Let your silence become the shield no one sees coming. Let it speak of your self-mastery, louder than any defense ever could. 4. Stop explaining. Let mystery lead explanation is often mistaken for strength. We assume that being clear, being transparent, and being open makes us trustworthy, persuasive, and respected. But clarity, when handed over too quickly, is not a gift. It is a compromise. Every time you over-explain, you surrender terrain. You invite others into your internal world and offer them a map of your logic, your fears, your doubts. And when someone has a map of your mind, they know how to navigate your reactions. They know what to question, what to press, and what to challenge. You become predictable. And in the realm of power, predictability is vulnerability. There's a deeper form of influence that doesn't come from being understood. It comes from being felt. And feeling is stirred not by explanations, but by mystique. A leader who speaks too much becomes a narrator of his own relevance. A strategist who always clarifies his move gives the opponent time to counter. A man who seeks to be known by words dilutes his essence. Presence, on the other hand, needs no narration. It reshapes the atmosphere silently. It does not plead for recognition. It radiates command. In silence, people project. They assume. They imagine. And what they imagine often weighs more than anything you could have said. This is why silence builds leverage. You don't clarify your every action. You don't defend every pause. You move without giving away the intention behind it. And suddenly, others are responding not to what you said, but to what they think you might do. That is mystique. That is silent power. And it's not passive, it's architectural. You build it deliberately by speaking less, by acting with precision, by letting the absence of words deepen your presence. Picture a high-level meeting. A decision must be made. Everyone is arguing, justifying, laying out bulletproof logic. But one person says little, observes, then near the end speaks a few measured sentences, direct, grounded, clear. The room quiets. Why? Because the absence that preceded those words gave them weight. Because silence had been the amplifier, not the noise. When you explain too much, you lower the mask. You hand others the lens through which to dissect you. You may feel noble, transparent, but what you lose is positioning. Silence, on the other hand, is not a void. It's a fortress. It repels unnecessary inspection. It dares others to sit with their own discomfort. And in that discomfort, they begin to respect you, not because you demanded it, but because they cannot decode you. Many people believe that withholding explanations makes them appear cold, arrogant, or detached. But detachment is often mistaken for emotional mastery, and emotional mastery is the backbone of all Stoic strength. You don't need to broadcast your reasoning. You simply need to remain centered in it. The less you explain, the more others have to meet your energy with caution, with curiosity, with respect. The Stoics never wasted breath proving themselves. Marcus Aurelius never wrote for applause. He wrote to remind himself that a man of virtue does not declare his integrity, he lives it. In this way, the refusal to explain is not silence out of pride. It is action rooted in clarity. You do not need to justify what is aligned. You do not need to unpack decisions made in discipline. Instead, you let the results speak. You let the atmosphere shift. You let the mystery work in your favor. And in doing so, you escape the trap most people fall into, believing they must always be understood. You don't. You must only be effective. And effectiveness often thrives in quiet, in patience, in the pause that unsettles others, not because it is loud, but because it refuses to fill the space with emotional clutter. When others expect a justification, you offer calm. When they prepare for debate, you offer stillness. And in doing so, you reframe the entire dynamic, from defensiveness to dominance. That is how mystery leads. That is how you become untouchable. 5. Lead quietly, strike precisely. Noise distracts. Silence focuses. In a world obsessed with constant reaction, the rarest trait is restraint. The loudest person in the room often reveals the most weakness, not because of what they say, but because they show they must say something. They are compelled to respond, to defend, to prove. But true leadership begins the moment you no longer feel the urge to explain yourself to everyone. You don't need to announce your strategy to those who wouldn't understand it. You lead, not through noise, but through presence. And that presence is only sharpened by your ability to wait, observe, and move with precision. Explanation is reactive. Precision is deliberate. Those who lead with power don't act on impulse. They measure the room. They read the dynamics. They sense what is not said. And when they do speak, it cuts through the fog like a blade. Not because they said more, but because they said only what mattered. One sentence, at the right moment, can bend the entire situation toward your favor. But that moment can't be seized if you're constantly speaking. In silence, you gather leverage. In quiet, you build command. Then, when the moment arrives, you strike, not with emotion, but with accuracy. Think of the calmest person in a crisis meeting. The one who doesn't panic, who doesn't fill silence with insecurity. They let others reveal their positions. They listen. They let the chaos expand itself. Then after the noise dies down, they offer one decisive move. That's not luck. That's discipline. And it's a discipline anyone can build by refusing to play the short game of verbal dominance. You lead best when you stop trying to win the conversation and instead shape the outcome. The modern world confuses noise with strength. The boss who yells, the influencer who overshares, the leader who responds to every slight. But the one who knows their value does not perform for approval. They execute. They do not defend their plan, they deliver the result. Silence becomes their posture, not because they are afraid to speak, but because they have learned when not to. They know that leadership is less about showcasing ideas and more about embodying calm, clear resolve. And in that stillness, they become a mirror to the chaos around them. Others adjust. Others recalibrate. A real leader can change the temperature of a room without a word. But it begins by mastering the need to react, by stepping back internally, by waiting for the time when words aren't just a release of tension, but a weapon of clarity. This is not just philosophical, it's strategic. On the battlefield of negotiation, in high-stakes decision-making, in relational conflict, he who speaks last, and with fewest words, often controls the frame. He dictates the final tone. His silence builds suspense. His words arrive like judgment. The Stoics understood this deeply. They weren't passive men, they were disciplined. Marcus Aurelius faced rebellion, war, betrayal, yet remained measured. He didn't rush to rebut every insult. He wrote in his journal, not to convince others, but to clarify his own mind. That is where precision begins, not in arguments, but in inner alignment. When your actions and thoughts are congruent, you don't rush, you don't react, you move from the center. Too many fall into the trap of defending every move, explaining every choice, fearing they'll be misunderstood. But leadership is not a popularity contest. It's not about how loud you are, it's about how deeply you can stay anchored when the world pulls. So build that anchor, build the habit of quiet leadership. Practice saying less in the next meeting. Wait before replying to that heated message. Let your calm unsettle them. Let your restraint reshape the room. And when you do speak, make it count, not to win attention, but to shift momentum. Speak like every word is chosen. Speak like silence taught you something. Speak like a man who doesn't need to be understood because he's already in command. 6. Arguing reveals weakness. Stillness projects strength. Every time you raise your voice to defend yourself, you give something away. Not just words, not just emotion. You give away positioning. In the arena of power, the more you speak, the more they map you. And in that mapping, you lose leverage. Because argument, no matter how intelligent, is always reactive. It begins from a place of needing to be understood, of trying to shape how others see you. But true strength has no need for outside validation. It simply is. And it's that calm assertion of being, that unwavering stillness that draws real influence. When you argue, you highlight what triggers you. Your frustration becomes a spotlight, revealing exactly where your fortress is thin. It tells the other person what matters too much to you, what you can't ignore. And if they are observant, they will come back to test it again. Not because they're malicious, but because you've shown your emotional blueprint. In contrast, when you remain still, when you meet provocation with composed silence, you deny the other side the map. You remain unreadable. And in a world where people react without thinking, the unreadable man becomes the most dangerous. Stillness is not passivity. It's control. And it's rare. Most men are prisoners of their impulses. They hear something offensive and they feel compelled to retaliate. They are baited, hooked, and reeled in by ego. But the one who resists that bait demonstrates something deeper. A mastery of self that no words can match. In a corporate setting, imagine a boardroom where tempers rise. The loudest man insists on his point, his pride bleeding into every sentence. But the one who says little, who watches, who absorbs and waits, he holds the room. Not because he dominates it, but because his restraint forces others to recalibrate their behavior. In leadership, perception is power. People don't follow those who speak the most. They follow those whose presence makes them pause. And presence is built on stillness. When you don't need to argue, when you don't rush to explain, you communicate something far more powerful than any speech. You communicate that you're grounded, that you cannot be shaken by noise, that your sense of self is untouchable. And in that clarity, others find stability. The Stoics understood this not as a tactic, but as a way of being. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Be like the rock that the waves keep crashing over. It stands unmoved, and the raging of the sea falls still around it." That is stillness, not weakness, but the ultimate form of inner power. And yet modern culture tells us to clap back, to defend our truth, to speak our mind. But often the loudest minds are the least certain. They speak not from strength, but from the fear of being unseen. The Stoic doesn't fear that. He lives with intention, not attention. His value isn't up for debate. And this shift, from proving to presence, is where transformation happens. Next time someone challenges your ideas or questions your motives, don't reach for the reflex to explain. Let silence absorb the tension. Let your calm unsettle their expectation. Let them reveal themselves while you remain whole, because the man who does not argue does not lose. He allows the storm to pass, and when the dust settles, he's still standing, untouched, commanding more through silence than others ever could through noise. In your daily life, train this. In moments of tension, at home, at work, even online, pause, breathe, hold the space, say less, say nothing if needed. Let stillness do the speaking. Over time, it builds your mystique. And mystique, once established, becomes a shield no provocation can pierce. Where others react, you respond. Where others unravel, you observe. And in that space, you rise. 7. In a loud world, silence is authority. When the whole world shouts, the whisper rules. In a society addicted to noise, filled with arguments, opinions, and never-ending displays of dominance, silence doesn't just stand out, it commands. But not all silence is created equal. Passive silence is invisible. Strategic silence, however, is magnetic. It pulls attention without asking for it. It asserts without attacking. In a culture where people believe that speaking more equals more power, the man who holds his tongue rewrites the rules. He becomes a fortress, quiet, contained, impenetrable. Silence, when practiced with intention, is not the absence of voice but the presence of control. And this control has a weight to it. It disorients those who thrive on chaos. It unsettles the insecure, and it empowers the one who chooses it. In a heated room, when every voice is battling to be heard, the one who does not react becomes the center of gravity. Others bend toward his stillness because it offers what they lack, mastery over emotion. This is how presence becomes power, not through domination, but through calm, steady influence that speaks louder than volume ever could. The Stoics taught that to master your inner world is to transcend the noise of the outer one. Their power was not in how much they argued, but how little they needed to. For them, restraint was not weakness. It was the highest form of discipline, a quiet sword that never needed to be drawn to be respected. The world, however, teaches the opposite, that if you don't fight back, you lose, that silence equals submission. But this belief is not strong. It's a reaction to fear. Fear of being overlooked, misunderstood, unseen. The Stoic does not share this fear. His validation is internal. His actions are intentional. And his silence is not empty. It's loaded with awareness. This kind of silence transforms how people relate to you. In a negotiation, the one who doesn't rush to fill the pause often controls the outcome. In relationships, the one who does not argue but observes deeply is the one who holds emotional leverage. And on social media, where everyone scrambles to be heard, the one who speaks rarely but with weight becomes the one others wait for. This is how mystique is formed, not by talking more, but by making every word carry gravity. And in that gravity, people feel your depth. But make no mistake, this kind of silence is not passive. It requires training. You must learn to sit with discomfort, to resist the bait of provocation, to pause when your ego demands a reaction. You must understand that by speaking less, you see more. That by choosing stillness, you hear the subtext. And in every interaction, this restraint becomes your greatest advantage. It's not about winning the moment, it's about owning the energy in the room. One of the most common mistakes people make is believing they need to defend themselves constantly. That every accusation, every disagreement, and every misunderstanding requires a rebuttal. But reacting to every challenge only shows how easily you can be moved. The Stoic, instead, remains rooted. He knows who he is. He doesn't need the world to echo it back to him. And that detachment from external validation is what gives him an unshakable presence. Today, test your strength in one moment of tension. Choose not to reply. Let your silence hold space instead of rushing to fill it. See what shifts, not just in others, but within you. That pause, that refusal to engage in noise, becomes the beginning of your authority. Because true power doesn't need a microphone. It needs presence. And presence, when built on stillness, becomes unbreakable. Real strength does not scream. It does not argue. It does not chase validation in noisy rooms. The deeper power is silent, steady, unshaken. What we've explored today is not just a theory. It's a way of being. A Stoic way of walking through life without being pulled into emotional traps or battles that don't serve your highest self. Arguing reveals your buttons. Silence removes them. Each time you choose stillness over reaction, you reclaim your energy. Every time you resist the urge to prove your point, you protect your authority. You become the calm in the storm. You become the one others look to when everything else feels chaotic. And not because you demanded attention, but because you embodied presence. Start small. In the next disagreement, pause, watch. Let others speak first. Learn to observe not just words, but what's beneath them. Ego, insecurity, distraction. Let your silence be your teacher. The more you practice this, the more influence you carry without effort. Remember, influence isn't in how loud you speak, but in how deeply you're heard. And often, you are heard most clearly when you say nothing at all. So take this lesson with you, not just in your mind, but into your habits, into your relationships, into your leadership. Practice silence not as absence, but as command. Not as a retreat, but as a strategy. Let it become part of who you are. And now I invite you to share. Have you ever stayed silent when you could have argued and something powerful happened? Share your experience below. Your story might be the spark someone else needs today.